Oh, sorry, I thought you said it was 10.
Yeah, it's 10 now. Yeah, it is now.
All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Licensing Committee today. Could you please make sure to turn your microphones on if you speak and turn them off when you finish, and also to switch your mobile phones off. I'll now ask for the recording and live streaming of this meeting to commence, please. Okay. Just to start off, members, I thought it would be useful for new and returning members in particular, but also for those that have been on the committee for a while, to remind you what the role of this licensing committee is. The Constitution confirms that the licensing committee is to deal with all policy-related decisions relating to hackney carriage and private hire vehicles, operators and drivers, sex establishments, hypnotism, street trading and scrap metal, animal welfare and any other licensing provisions that the authority is required to undertake, not mentioned elsewhere in this constitution. It also has some limited fee setting obligations. Members of this committee also form the membership for panel hearings, which is a subcommittee of the licensing committee, 3 members in total, and deals with applications and reviews concerning material considerations on fitness to hold a license for those areas mentioned above and compliance with the license and policy. And item number 1, minutes. Are members happy to agree the minutes of the meeting held on February the 5th, which can be found on pages 3 to 11 of the agenda pack? Agreement? Yes, Linda.
Forget that. Minutes of the meeting on page 6 of the agenda pack, page 4 of the minutes. Third paragraph, fourth paragraph down, it says a vote was then taken, 5 votes for the proposal and 4 against. The chairman then made her casting vote and voted against the proposal. I think there must be something missing there. If it came to a casting vote, it must be that it was 5 votes for the proposal and 4 against. Then the chairman added her own vote, which made it a tied vote, because otherwise she couldn't have used a casting vote to vote against it. So either it wasn't a casting vote, but on 5 votes for and 4 against, that wouldn't have worked.
Thank you, Linda. I will ask the Teresa from the Democratic Services point of view if she would clarify that for us.
Thank you, Linda. And it was raised at full council on the 20th of February about that error. So it should read that a vote was taken, 5 votes for the proposal and 5 against. The chairman then made her casting vote and voted against that proposal. Okay.
Anybody else have any comments on the minutes? Oh, sign the minutes, Julie.
Yep, just there.
Where? I'm sorry, I've disguised it. Thank you. Thank you. Julie, do we have any apologies?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. We have apologies from Councillor Stephen Askew and Councillor David Blackburn.
And I'd like to add Richard Duffield to that, please.
Yeah, Councillor Atterwell apologised. He is actually in the building, but he's had to go to a meeting upstairs, so he asked me to give his apologies. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Urgent business, if any? I don't have any urgent business. And declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations of interest? Non-members wishing to address the meeting? Welcome to our Cabinet member, Helen Crane. And we'll move on to the latest legislative, I can't get my tongue around it, legislative updates, which is a standing item, a verbal update provided by Josie Hoban, the Senior Licensing Officer. Thank you, June.
Thank you, Chairman. There's not much to pass on today. There's no legislative updates, but a couple of things just to note for information. The Home Office has confirmed an extension of the licensing hours for the Women's Euros finals. So if England or Wales reach either the semis and or the finals, there will be an extension for every on-sales premises to stay open until 1 o'clock in the morning. And the only other one to note is that I'm sure most of you are aware the single-use vape ban came into effect on Sunday, the 1st of June. Thank you.
Item 7, licensing performance update Q4. And we'll hand back to Josie to present the report, which can be found on pages 12 to 15 of your agenda packs and is just for members to note.
Thank you, Chairman. So the report is for information only, is to give you members of the committee a flavour of the work we are doing in the team currently and have done over the last year. As you'll be aware, I just handed round, just prior to the meeting, Appendix A to the report, which has the numbers of, that's really bad feedback, the numbers of inspections, etc., and applications that have been received by the team in the last year. So that's there for information. The team, as you know, works with partner agencies collaboratively to eradicate and work with businesses really that may be causing some issues. So we've had a few incidents recently where the police, the licensing officer has been working with police colleagues in Attleborough due to concerns over underage drinking and drug use. I'm pleased to say that that work is ongoing with the police and they are monitoring things. We've been working with the trading standards officers and street wardens in Thetford due to concerns over illicit and illegal tobacco products. Again, it's a continued problem, and also unlicensed sale of alcohol, and that work continues also with trading standards. We've been working with colleagues from environmental protection regarding noise issues. We've reached that time of the year again when everybody's got their windows open because it's nice and warm, but it does mean that obviously noise travels. So from our perspective, that's premises where they have live or regulated entertainment of some description that's causing an issue. The licensing officer also attended a public meeting with Deering Town Football Club with an environmental protection officer to respond to any relevant licensing questions at that public meeting. That event then took place, the licence has been granted and the event, they have had, I believe, 2 events, Durham Day and the party on the park. So those have been going ahead. The Licensing Act 2003 Statement of Principles we will be getting to under the Committee of the Licensing Authority. That's the 5-year review that comes to you as the committee. We will be asking you for consideration for us to go out to public consultation on that. It's a statutory requirement under the Licensing Act that that policy is reviewed at least every 5 years, and we must do so by the 7th of January. The Safety Advisory Group work continues, and obviously we're getting to that busy time of the year again. There are several large-scale events taking place over the summer months, and we're busy working with the organisers and partner agencies to ensure that public safety is paramount in the planning of those events. As I just said, we've assisted and have already enforced and attended the Deering Town Football Club Party on the Park and Deering Day. The events still to come are Buckingham Air Show, Wayland Show, Old Buckingham Country Park Music Weekend, FM Seno Park, and Wheels on the Field in Thetford. They're the major ones. There are some smaller ones that we may be attending. In regards to taxi licensing, we are continuing to see an increase in applications and inquiries for new drivers and vehicles, and colleagues in neighbouring authorities are still saying the same thing. They're seeing an increase also. Doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason for it. It just seems to be happening. The new fees that were set by committee and the council came into effect on the 2nd of April. We haven't had too much lashback. I think we've had 1 or 2 people come back to us and say they weren't aware that they were increasing, but they were all consulted I think it was from October, November, December last year. And yeah, they have just come in now, so we're moving along with those. We had a couple of, or a committee going back to late February, where we had a driver basically brought before the committee. He didn't attend the committee, chose not to, but he had been driving a vehicle unlicensed. So for a period of about a month, he had no driver's license. He hadn't renewed in time. And for a period of approximately 3 to 4 months, his vehicle was not licensed. Committee decided to revoke that license. He didn't appeal to the Magistrates' Court. That driver's details have now been added to the National Register for revocations, refusals and suspensions, also known as the NR3S, in line with the national guidance and our policy. So some good work there from the committee, from the panel. We've had 2 immediate driver revocations. Those are on medical grounds. One is a more minor case, so if that person is able to come back to us within the time frame of what's left on their licence and provide medical evidence to say they meet the Group 2 standards and obviously other factors as well, then their licence will be reinstated by fast track process. They do, just for clarity, they do only get back the remainder of what was left on the original licence, and there is no fee to reinstate it. The other gentleman, unfortunately, we don't think he's going to be able to do that within the time frame of his licence before it expires. The taxi policy, we are still conducting the review of the taxi policy in line with the DFT guidance, and really do hope to get that to you before the end of the year. I have some good news finally on the garage contracts. So the taxi testing stations, as we in the team call them, all the document has been drafted. We have finally gone out with expressions of interest. There is a notice on the public notices page of the web pages for Breckland Council. Existing garages have been notified in person. I've been around and seen all 3 of them to let them know that we are out to ask for expressions of interest for other garages to become licensed to do our taxi testing. And we had 3 garages who had previously notified us that they were interested, and they've been contacted to say the expressions of interest have gone live. The process is basically an expressions of interest for a month, so they have until the 30th of June, any garages who are Class 4 MOT licensed to contact us to say they would like to be considered, and then there will be a process put in place to actually look at sending out the application forms, and then a panel would be formed to review those within the council. The zoo licence, the big renewal, so it's the 6-year renewal, inspection for the licensed zoo was carried out. It's a massive long day procedure. I was there for that one alongside Al, our animal licensing officer. We had our own vet. There were 2 vets from AFA, the Animal and Plant Health Authority, the zoo's own vet, zoo's own staff. I don't think I've ever seen so many people on one inspection, but very pleased to say it went really well. The renewal licence will be granted shortly before the expiry of the existing licence in July. And I do think it's great testament to the working relationship between the council officers and the zoo management and staff that it went so well on the day, and that there were very, very minor things that were found. There were no great issue. So I think well done to the zoo for implementing all of those things that had been agreed prior to the inspection. The animal licensing officer he's had a massively busy year. He has inspected every licensed animal welfare premises in Breckland, plus 14 businesses that made new applications in the past 12 months. He's obviously also carried out investigations into animal welfare complaints and provided advice to potential new business startups prior to application. It's just been a massively busy year. So with the animal welfare licenses under the layer regulations, the 2018 regulations, the licenses are 1, 2 or 3 years. So every 3 years we find we have to go and inspect every premises because it's either due for renewal or it's on its interim inspection. So every 3 years, I think it was 90 premises had to be inspected last year. So it's a big task to somebody, just one officer on their own. But that's all been completed, I'm pleased to say. The primate licensing, the legislation came into effect. It comes into effect 2 separate dates. The first tranche came into effect on the 6th of April this year, The second tranche, where members of the public who have primates need to be licensed by, is the 6th of April next year, 2026. So we've undertaken the work to get all the forms together. There's a new web page, if anybody's interested in looking at it, on the licensing web pages on Breckland Council, just giving information. Fees are going through and it's all running along quite nicely. We anticipate that we will contact local vets going forward in the next few months prior to the April 2026 date, to see if they're aware of any members of the public who have primates, so that we may contact them to make them aware of that new legislation. So that's ongoing. Scrap metal site inspections have taken place. Again, all of the scrap metal sites have been inspected over the last 12 months. Again, a 3-year licence, it just falls that way. So they've all been done. All the betting shops, adult gaming centres and the bingo hall have all been inspected over the past 4 months to check for compliance, and no issues found. We continue to inspect licensed street traders and seek out unlicensed vendors, and our assistant licensing officer was tracking down 2 unlicensed ice cream vans just recently in the locality. They are now licensed, I'm pleased to say, so good work on their part. We also have the pavement licenses. Sorry, there's quite a lot on here. We also have the pavement licenses, and we do go out and check that businesses are compliant. So where they've said how many tables and chairs and what other furniture they're having, we do make sure they're compliant with that, and also that those that have got them, that need them, do have the licenses. And finally, there is a review of the Breckland sex establishment policy, which I believe comes up next on the agenda. That has been reviewed by licensing officers and will be presented to you next, I believe, in this committee. Just to say thank you for listening to all of that. The appendix to that report that I handed out earlier just gives you a flavour of the number of licenses quarterly and inspections, and then the yearly total, just to see how much work is being undertaken by the team. And we are 4 officers, not quite 4 full-time equivalents, and then obviously we have Keith as our team leader and Craig as our manager, but I think that's a lot of work for the number of officers that we have, so I'd like to commend my officers in my team for the great work that they're doing year on year, because the number of licenses and inspections that are done just seem to creep up year on year without any extra resource, so well done to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Josie. And I'd like to follow up your commendation of the work that the team's done. That is a massive amount of inspections completed for such a small team, and a great success with Banham Zoo, because they are the jewel in the crown for tourism that Breckland's got. So, I mean, that was really, really good news. And to commend the animal licensing officer on inspecting all the premises, that one person to do that, and it's all about the animals. So thank you very much, Josie. That was an excellent report. Does anybody have any questions? Gordon.
Yes, Josie. Senno Park, you mentioned early in that list. I'm assuming it is going to be inspected to the same standard as last year and the year before. Thank you very much for that. There is some concern locally that the stories of this being the last year for that particular festival, there is great concern that the one that's to follow it will be likely to be worse. And so locally people are asking me to make sure that Breckland are on the ball. Now I'm sure you are, and I would have emailed you in a month or 2 anyway, but I'll bring it up today as you brought it up. Please watch Senno Park.
Duly noted, it's on our radar, so we will be monitoring. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for having me back on the committee. It's a long time since I was here. So this is to reassure me, really, a technical question. On the road between Toffwood and Shipton, we have a strawberry cellar in the lay-by, the most delicious strawberries, I have to say. And he's put some signs up on the highway. So does he need a licence to do that?
thank you for that, Councillor Turner. Yes, he does need to have one. If you would pass those details on to me after the committee, I'll make sure the licensing officer takes a visit there. He's actually in the office tomorrow, so we'll make him go out and have a little chat with them to let them know they need to be licensed. But yes, anybody selling on a public highway within the Breckland area, there are few exceptions, but they generally need to have a street trading consent licence.
Thank you, and yeah, to echo what others have said, well done on your hard work and putting the animals particularly at the heart of things. It was only just I feel it's almost like a Linda point here, but on 1.13 on page 14, it looks like under the sex establishment, sexual entertainment venue license, it looks like the sentence tails off. There's an error just on that. It says to request tat-a. So if we just could update that, that would be great. Thanks. Yeah, I only just noticed it, otherwise I'd have raised before. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just going to come back to Councillor Bambridge's point about the FM field manoeuvres. So just as initial assurance there, we do have a safety advisory group, so the event organisers will be called into that. Of course, it borders North Norfolk, so we have worked in conjunction with North Norfolk because part of it is sitting in there. Well, yeah, I think it's actually the venue is split between the two districts, so we have been working also with North Norfolk. There is a noise management plan there. And I think there was some previous concerns, so we've also we can check that will happen again. But in addition to, yeah, Breckland and North Norfolk officers monitoring, we did get the venue to make sure they'd got their noise. They have their own noise consultant on there that had done some roving monitoring at various points, and particularly around complainant properties as well. So yes, I think it's just assurance we are onto that. They will come into safety advisory group where we'll ask some questions. And as I say, sorry, I just wanted to mention the North Norfolk bit. We are joined up with those officers and North Norfolk, so we're dealing with it sort of collaboratively and all nicely joined up.
Yes, thank you for that, if I may, Chairman. I know it's an awkward venue. I mean, Senno Hall is not in Breckland. Much of the park is not in Breckland, but every entrance to it where there are lodge gates have people who are constituents of mine. So it's an odd site in terms of the district, but thank you.
Thank you, Julie. We'll move on to item number 8, the revised Breckland sex establishment policy, which is on pages 16 to 74. Thank you, Josie.
Sorry, it's me again, folks. So we are bringing this report to you because we are seeking committee approval to consult on the revised sex establishment policy. So on the 27th of January 2011, Breckland Council adopted Schedule 3 of the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1982, as amended by Section 27 of the Policing and Crime Act 2009. That enabled us to regulate the provision of sex establishments within the district. The current policy was adopted by full council on the 23rd of May 2013, and whilst there have been no legislative changes, there are other matters that should now be considered to bring the policy up to date. Those things are modern slavery, human trafficking and child sexual exploitation. Copy of the current Breckland sex establishment was attached as Appendix A. We've reviewed the policy and provided a draft as attached as Appendix B. This has, as I say, added sections on modern slavery, human trafficking and child sexual exploitation. And we've also beefed up the conditions for each of the types of licence, so sex shops, sex cinemas and sexual entertainment venues, because they were quite small, as you will have seen from the current policy previously. They've now been revised in line with what many other local authorities nationally are going with. So there's no requirement in legislation to consult on the policy. However, it is considered best practice to seek the views of all parties who may be applicants or may be affected by applications within the district when the policy changes take place. Therefore, we wish to seek approval to go out to public consultation on the revised policy. It is proposed that the review of the policy, the process will be as follows if approved for consultation by the committee. So we would like to go out to consultation between the 6th of June and 31st of August 2025, and that will be midnight on the 31st of August. So that's approximately 12 weeks, which is a good length for a consultation period. We would look to bring back feedback, any feedback received, to the licensing committee on the 24th of September, along with any recommendations for amendments or changes to be made. Agreement would then be sought at that meeting from the licensing committee to adopt that policy. So options available to members are to do nothing. That would result in us keeping the current policy that does not reflect the need to consider modern slavery, human trafficking and child sexual exploitation, and conditions that are generic rather than specific for each of the 3 types of sex establishments as defined in the Act. Option 2 is to approve the proposed draft policy for consultation without changes, and option 3 is to approve the proposed draft policy for consultation with changes. The reason we've recommended to go out to consultation is to ensure that Breckland Council, acting as the licensing authority, can meet its statutory duties under Schedule 3 of the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions as previously stated, and have a clear, transparent and robust policy in place. It's expected by having a new policy, it will be transparent and enable us to be compliant with our statutory duties when licensing any future sex establishments. Just to be aware, we don't currently have any. The sex shop that was licensed is no longer trading, so that has gone. We don't have any sex establishments currently. Section 5.1 covers the implications as outlined in 5.0. We are consulting via email. The consultation notice will be placed on the Breckland Council web pages, and the document, the actual policy document draft, will also be available on the Council's website. And the licensing of sex establishments is a statutory duty of this Council. By having an updated policy, we will be transparent to all parties on how we determine each individual application made under the Act. It supports the corporate strategic vision of Breckland, a place where people and businesses thrive. Norfolk Constabulary will be a consultee on the policy. Details of data protection are specific and specifically contained within the policy, the same for equality and diversity. So therefore, the recommendation is that the committee consider the proposed draft revised Breckland sex establishment licensing policy and approve it to go out to consultation, please. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Josie. Could I have a proposer and a seconder to that recommendation, please?
Could I ask a question first?
I
mean,
need
we
a...
just had a presentation.
Well, I've got a proposer. I need a seconder. Thank you. And now you can ask your question, Gordon.
Thank you. I'm jumping ahead, aren't I? I haven't sat on a committee before.
So for clarity, we want to put it into the policy because there can be an effect, as you know. We've discussed modern slavery previously. It is felt that it is an issue that we need to consider when we look at applications. It's certainly something that the police consider. In regard to modern slavery in other areas, it's not a specific licensing issue in regards to it in general, but obviously every type of license that we have, this is now becoming part of forming each of the policies. I'm not sure, I think it's probably more a police matter in the general realms of everyday life, if that's what you're aiming at. I'm not sure, Gordon, sorry.
Sorry. if that's okay. Yeah. So I think what Josie said. I think sorry. The question is, so yes, we are considering under licensing. I think it is a separate, wider, all-encompassing issue. Just as again as an assurance, probably not at licensing level, but we do sit on the Norfolk. Norfolk Community Safety Partnership. Sorry, when I can say it. And some of the thematic groups. So there's thematic groups in there about violent crime. There is one about an exploitation group, etc. So I think as a separate issue, I think as Josie said, yeah, we are dealing with a bit with licensing, but we are linked into that, and there is part of a Norfolk groups that we do contribute into, and I think also, you know, which I've said to partners in there, we are out and about. We visit lots of, you know, commercial premises. You know, if we count, you know, we've got safer street wardens, we've got food safety officers, we've got licensing officers in there. There are some free training that they're offering at the moment as well. But I think, you know, we can look and we can pass that intelligence into, you know, the police and other agencies as well if we are seeing signs that concern us. So hopefully that, give you a bit of an assurance, and I hope that did answer the question, but if not, I'm sure you'll come back to me.
Yes, thank you, and perhaps I ought to come back to you and not Josie.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Gordon. Kendra.
Thank you. My question was just about the list of consultees, if you like. The interested parties, such as Citizens Advice and Sexual Health Clinics, can we add to that list? For example, I do believe there are one or two like trade unions for sex workers and other groups. So not necessarily to, you know, amend that, but it's not an exhaustive list. So can we put forward other people and other groups to consult?
Certainly, if you have any information that you would like us to send a copy of the policy to, the draft policy, please let us know and we will add them to the email list. Yes, please.
Linda.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got two questions, if I can. First one follows on from Kendra's, really. In the original policy, amongst the list of consultees were district councillors. I notice they're not included in the new policy. That's the first one. And the second one, in the new proposed policy, on page 6, under those that it affects, does the first line include care homes and day centres? It talks about adult proximity, but it doesn't specify care homes or day centres where there may be vulnerable adults there. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that. So to go back to the district councillors, they are an automatic consultee, so we will be contacting DEM services. In fact, that's already been set up to go out on Friday, for assuming that it gets passed, to go out to consultation. In regard to
Sorry, Chairman. No, I mean, in the actual policy, where you've got a list in the policy that the public would read, it doesn't say district councillors.
would you like that added?
Please. Thank you.
You can do that, that's no problem, thank you.
Thank you, Josie.
Thank you.
Is that it, Linda? Sarah Taylor.
Thank you. Unless I've missed it, which is possible because this is the first one of these policies I've had to look at. I understand it that we can, as an authority, actively limit the number of sex establishments in a policy area, which is the case in other areas. And if I read this correctly, we're not proposing to actively limit to nil. We only say that the number may be nil. Is there a reason why we're not actively seeking to limit? That might be more for the portfolio holder.
Just having to clarify my understanding of our advice that we got. So I think we can refuse. So we would look at an area, obviously if it's not suitable, an area, so we would consider that. We can just refuse. I think our legal advice, which I was just checking, our legal advice is that it is probably safer not to limit, because if you have a limitation policy, you can be legally challenged that that's restricting the market, and you could be legally challenged. So I think what the advice was, and we can recheck that, is that it's, you know, that you've got a right to refuse it anyway. So you would refuse on a case-by-case basis, but actually by putting a cap on numbers, then you could be legally challenged and you increase your risk of legal challenge. I think that
But any license refusal could be challenged also, and we're looking at major cities with a nil limit on. Norwich has a nil limit. Sheffield has a nil limit. I'm just curious as to why we're opening ourselves up potentially. I mean, the fact is we don't have any, but you know that there's a potentiality there which isn't, like, we could be more proactive and just limit any review to one instance rather than the potential for multiple instances. Do you see what I mean? Like the fact that it's legally challengeable holds whether you're dealing with a license application or a decision within a policy. They're still challengeable, just through different mechanisms.
Again, as I say, we can go away and we can get some advice. I would suggest that we still consult anyway, but that might be a recommendation that, you know, somebody wants to come back with to consider. We can get some legal advice. I suppose the question is, yeah, you know, do we want, as Breckland, to say that a particular type of business, which could be well run, I'm not saying, you know, or whatever, do we actually, you know, the law allows that they can be granted and those businesses can operate. So, you know, are we, and I don't know, that's not a decision for me, but, you know, are we saying at Breckland we don't want any of those businesses within Breckland full stop? Or do we consider it and say, well, we'll consider it on its merits, and if it's necessary and proportionate, we will refuse it rather than a blanket. We won't accept anyway.
So my understanding is it doesn't have to be blanket. You can differentiate according to different types of establishment. It isn't that binary. So my understanding is Sheffield have a limit on certain types of sex establishments. Like, I'm almost certainly going to get this wrong. So no cinemas, no sex shops, but other forms of establishment are limited to 1 or 2 in their city area. So there is a possibility of differentiating. I would like to propose that that is specifically considered, because I think, yes, there are market forces at play. We're seeing that now within Breckland. But Josie, as you pointed out, things are ever changing, not least because we've got growing population. So of course demands will change as our population changes. And given the minimum requirements around review of policies being every 5 years, I think, then was it 5 years or was it less than that? Sorry, I can't remember. But anyway, there's a, you know, we're not reviewing it every 6 months, presumably, right? So there's a gap there. And I would propose that we take a more proactive position in considering the delimitation of these rather than having to then react as and when things change.
Yeah, certainly we'll take that comment on board, and thanks for that clarification. Sorry, I was probably under the understand that you were probably saying it should be nil. Which, you know, but yeah, okay, that's fine. So I think we can consider that. Again, we would have to take, I think that legal advice is, does it expose us to an increased legal risk? And then that's a decision we you know, or you need to make. We can obviously get that advice, can't we? But I think it was based on previous legal advice that the safer option was not to put the number in, because you then expose yourself to increased risk or increased legal risk. But we can, and we will, recheck that. Thank you.
Are you happy with that, Sarah? Yep. Okay. Josie.
Just to come back on that, just to say, whilst there is no statute of how often the policy has to be reviewed, and it has been quite some time since we last reviewed it, we can actually review it at any time and bring it back. So if we wanted to make those amendments going forward, if they weren't made after the consultation, they could be brought forward if we started to see an increase in those types of applications. So it could be done by that method going forward also as an option.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So my question is, obviously, Councillor Taylor's put forward a proposal to slightly make an amendment, and the team have said that they'll go away and seek legal clarification on that. Are we able today to give the team the go-ahead to make that amendment if the legal advice comes back that they can, so they don't have to come back to us and do a whole nother presentation? And can we put that in the proposal, that we propose that it goes to public consultation with the changes and on seeking legal advice on an amendment? If that amendment is legally upheld, then they have the permission to go to consultation, or are we going to make them come back again and go through this again?
If I may make a suggestion, it may be wise to, if you're so inclined, to go out to consultation. As part of that consultation process, if you would like to make that as an observation and put that representation in, as it were, then we can then obviously consider that as part of what we review before we then come back in September. So it could be looked at as part of that without the need, if you're minded to come back to the committee before we go out to consultation or during that process, because I think if you're going to look at numbers, then the committee is going to want to make that decision, and we could do that at the September stage if Craig agrees that that's a sensible approach. Might be one that you want to consider.
I think you need to take legal advice before you come up with that, because within other quasi-judicial processes, the consultation to make something less to make it less likely to fail through different sort of appeal mechanisms, that consultation needs to be robust. So in other jurisdictions, the proposal to have a nil limit is incorporated into the consultation on policies, because then that provides a much more robust position for the policy in its totality to be taken forward. So as frustrating as people might find it, my preference would be to defer the decision, because the decision we're being asked now is about approval to go forward to consultation, isn't it? So my personal preference would be that we defer this until the next committee to give chance to the team to actually take advice and then put a proposal forward, which we can then consider as a committee. And then once we've got it in the round, that consultation can then be a more well-rounded product. It only delays it for a few weeks in reality. And then the totality of it could go out to public consultation. I'm not sure the mechanics of it work by separating the two out.
Craig, you spoke about legal advice. Would that entail going to the IOL for advice as well?
Yes, I think we would seek external specialist legal advice on that. Again, that's a choice for the committee. I would suggest the purpose of the consultation is to invite comment. So again, if there is a comment that we should be restricting numbers, that is the whole purpose. We can't cut everything in the policy. And similarly, if we set a nil one, and then somebody then consults, they will say, well, you've already decided it because you put it in the policy. So there's swings and roundabouts. Is that you've already predetermined. But a business may say, well, I've got a legal right to operate, and you've now denied me that opportunity. So I'm just saying there's risks and there's pros and cons to each.
Well, I'd like to add, Craig, and take your advice that as you're taking legal advice, backed up by the expert advice from the Institute of Licensing, I think that should be belt and braces. What do you feel? I think that should be sufficient.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure I fully understand your comment, but when belt and braces, you mean the consultation should deal with the issue? Is that what you're saying? Or are you saying you think we should delay going out to consultation subject to getting that advice if that's what the committee wants? So.
Well, I think the thing is that we've got a recommendation here that you're getting legal advice. You'll be getting advice from the Institute of Licensing. So therefore, I would like to suggest that we take the recommendation that the committee consider the proposed draft revised Breckland sex establishment licensing policy and approve it for consultation. All in favour?
No, I haven't changed my mind. I want to speak on it.
We missed your hand, Gordon.
We looked at this whole issue in some considerable detail just a few years ago when we were associated with another council in Lincolnshire. And we looked at the whole question of limiting. And at that time, we made a decision that we shouldn't make a nil target, that we should have a limiting a target, exactly as Craig suggested. And I'm not saying we shouldn't look at it again, because we probably should look at it again, and we certainly should take advice, and we certainly should take legal advice, and as you say, from the Institute. But the issue must come back to the committee. We can't let the issue pass with officers' decisions. It must come back to the committee.
Thank you, Gordon. It would come back as part of the consultation. So given what I've said about taking legal advice and going to the Institute of Licensing, and then it can go out for consultation, I would put forward the recommendation, if nobody's got any other questions, that the committee consider the proposed draft revised Breckland sex establishment licensing policy and approve it for consultation. So can we take the votes for, please? And against? And any abstentions? Right, thank you. This recommendation has been approved. Agenda item 9, authorisation and delegations under the Animal Welfare Primate Licensing, England Regulations 2024. Craig Fowler, the Environmental Health and Licensing Manager, to present the report, which can be found on pages 75 to 78 of your agenda pack. And over to you, Craig.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I'm introducing this report as the report author is currently unavailable due to court attendance. So I'd like to introduce this report, which recommends that the Licensing Committee agree to delegate authority to officers so that the Council could comply with the statutory provisions and duties laid down in the Animal Welfare Primate Licences England Regulations 2024. As the report states, this piece of legislation came into force on the 6th of April 2025. This requires private keepers of any primates, that's non-human primates in the definition, to hold a licence. So persons can apply from April of this year, of 2025, and from April 2026, they will require a licence, and it will be an offence, subject to certain exceptions, to keep such animals without one. 2.2 of the report sets out the requested delegations so that officers are able to act on behalf of the council so that it may meet its statutory duties and obligations. I think that concludes the report. That there is further information in there, but I don't want to go into any further detail. If there's any questions, then I'm sure members will ask. Thank you.
Sorry, I keep thinking I've got the microphone that stays on all the time. Okay, the recommendation. Is that the committee agree to delegate authority to the officers listed under section 2.2 of the report. Could I have a proposer? And a seconder? Thank you. All in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. The recommendation has been approved. Thank you, everyone. The next meeting of the Licensing Committee will be held on Wednesday, the 24th of September, here at the Dereham offices. And we will now move on to the Committee of the Licensing Authority following a short comfort break. Are we live, Julie? All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Committee of the Licensing Authority. And we will I don't know if I want to do I need to read that out, Teresa, because I read it from before.
The licensing authority. This is about the
Yeah. Just for new members and for old members who've returned, to remind you what the role of the Committee of the Licensing Authority is and deals with. All matters relating to its role as the Licensing Authority under the Licensing Act 2003 and the Gambling Act 2005, except for the requirement to determine the authority's licensing policy under the Licensing Act 2003, which are both full council functions. This means this covers licensing in respect of alcohol, regulated entertainment, late night entertainment, and gambling. It would help if I put the right glasses on. Members of the committee also form the membership for panel hearings, which deal with applications for grant renewal, review or variations of premises licensing, club certificates and personal licenses under the Licensing Act and Gambling Act, where a hearing is required because either relevant representations or a valid review notice or a valid objection notice has been received by the authority. Are members happy to agree the minutes? All right, Sam? Okay. Oops. I'll just sign the minutes. Thank you, Teresa. We have no apologies because we are following on from the apologies of the previous committee. I have no urgent business. Do members have any declarations of interest? Non-members wishing to address the meeting. Once again, we have our executive member, Helen Crane, in attendance. And item 6, training requirements. Could any members tell me if they have any training requirements, please? No? I'm sure you haven't forgotten, Gordon. But if there are any training requirements you wish for, you know, just speak to committee services or to Josie, and I'm sure something can be put in place. Refresher. And item 7, feedback and discussion on recent panel meetings, if any. None? We'll move on to item 8, revised statement of licensing policy, the Licensing Act 2003. And Josie Hoven, the senior licensing officer, will present the report, which can be found on pages 7 to 123 of your agenda packs. And the recommendation for this is that the committee consider the proposed draft revised Breckland statement of licensing policy, Licensing Act 2003, and approve it for consultation. Thank you, Josie.
Thank you, Chairman. So we're here again with the Licensing Act policy, which has to be reviewed every 5 years. It's coming up on that time again. So back in November 2005, Breckland Council became the licensing authority for provisions under the Licensing Act 2003 that include terrible feedback, retail sale of alcohol, supply of alcohol by or on behalf of a club, provision of regulated entertainment and provision of late night refreshment within our Breckland district area. It is a requirement under the Act, under Section 5 of the Licensing Act 2003, that Breckland Council, as the licensing authority, prepares and publishes a statement of its licensing policy. It must be kept under review, and the licensing authority may make such revisions to it as they consider appropriate. The current statement of licensing policy came into effect on the 7th of January 2021. A copy of that is attached to the report as Appendix A. In order to comply with the legislative requirements, the current statement of licensing policy has been reviewed, and we must come back to you and have a published version by the 7th of January 2026. The current policy has been reviewed and updated to reflect various legislative changes which have occurred since the previous revision, and that includes the updated Section 182 guidance issued in February this year. The proposed draft revised statement of licensing policy is attached as Appendix B, and we have included a table of changes to the draft revised policy attached as Appendix C. The draft revised policy seeks to provide general guidance to applicants and other persons on the approach that Breckland Council will take. It's had enough of my voice. That Breckland Council will take when considering applications and how we will proceed with those. Why is it doing that?
Can you change it over?
Just a moment, we'll change the speaker. Okay, we'll try this one. So just to go back over that last point, the policy actually sets out how we determine applications under the Licence Act 2003, with the overriding aim of promoting the 4 licensing objectives that are the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, the prevention of public nuisance and protection of children from harm. As part of the process, the draft revised policy has to be consulted on before the adoption by Council. Section 5.3 of the Licensing Act 2003 prescribes a list of those persons that the licensing authority must consult, and those are the Chief Constable for Norfolk Constabulary, the Norfolk Fire and Rescue Services, persons and bodies representative of local holders of premises licences, the same of club premises certificates, persons and representatives of those who hold personal licences, persons and bodies representative of businesses and residents in the area, and the Director of Public Health for Norfolk County Council. Beyond these statutory requirements, it is for each licensing authority to decide the full extent of its consultation and whether any particular person or body is representative of any group described in the statute. It's proposed that the review of the policy process will be as followed, if approved for consultation by the committee today. So the consultation of the draft revised statement of licensing policy will take place between the 6th of June 2025 and again end at midnight on the 31st of August 2025, approximately 12 weeks. Feedback received will then be presented to the committee of the licensing authority at the meeting on the 24th of September, along with any recommendations or amendments or changes that should be made. Agreement will be sought at this meeting from COLA to recommend the adoption of the policy to full council. It's then proposed to take the draft revised policy to full council in October 2025 for ratification, and there's a slight change to what is in the report on page 8. That should read the 7th of January 2026 to coincide with when the current one expires. Options available to the committee are to do nothing. But if you do nothing, that's not really a viable option, as it would mean that there is no consultation, the process would be stopped, and there would be no policy from January 2026. The council has no discretion as to making the statement of licensing policy, although there is some discretion as to the content of it. The second option is to approve the proposed draft policy for consultation without changes, and third option, approve the proposed draft policy for consultation with changes. The reason for the recommendation is to ensure that Breckland Council, acting as the licensing authority, can meet its statutory duties under the Licence Act 2003 and to have a clear, transparent and robust policy in place. By having a robust policy in place, it will enable us to have compliance with our statutory duties under the Licensing Act 2003. We have considered the implications are set out at 5.0. Probably the most important to detail is that it is a statutory requirement that the licensing authority produces a Breckland Council statement of licensing policy, that it proposes to apply in exercising its function under the Licensing Act 2003, and that it reviews it every 5 years. If the authority does not produce a revised policy within a statutory timescale, there is a risk that the authority will not be in a position to process any applications under the Licensing Act 2003. That leaves the authority open to challenge. So the final recommendation, as stated by the Chairman, is that the committee consider the proposed draft revised policy and approve it for consultation. Thank you.
Please. And a seconder? Thank you. Do we have any questions? Gordon?
Yes, amongst the list you gave us, amongst the list you gave us, it could be said that parish councils are included, and by parish councils I include town, as persons or bodies represented, but I'd rather have liked to have seen them as consultees in their own right, rather than just the people they represent. 1.5, I think.
Linda? Sorry, I thought you were waiting for a response, Gordon.
Nodding suffice.
Thank you, Chairman. In the list of people that this covers, it says to protect children or keep children from harm, and a little bit above it, it says other people. So would that include vulnerable adults? I'm just thinking of somebody that might go into a pub and ask for Angela, and I just want to make sure that we cover all aspects of this while we're doing it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. That's a very good question. We do cover all aspects, and actually as part of the consultation process, if I may just ask my colleague, is it okay to mention the cap? Yeah. So as part of the consultation process, when the emails and letters go out, so we are sending the letters out to every licensed premises in Breckland, and we are sending it to all of the DPSs in every premises also. As part of that consultation process, there is also an information sheet on Ask for Angela and drink spiking to help with the Community Alcohol Partnership. Sorry, I have trouble getting my teeth around that one. So we are promoting those things as well, and I know that the Community Alcohol Partnership are doing some great work on that in the coming months also. But to help promote that, we are doing that also. But it does, the Licensing Act encompasses everybody. It's just specific to make sure that children under the age of 18 are not where they shouldn't be. And those specific things like Challenge 25 are there for that reason, to ensure that, you know, we're not serving underage alcohol to underage children, etc., etc.
Yeah, so I think just to supplement that as well, the terms, the protection of children from harm, is actually in the Licensing Act. So the 4 licensing objectives is prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, prevention of public nuisance, and the protection of children from harm. So I think some of your questions about vulnerable people, I don't know, might be drink spiking, Ask Angela, would come into the public safety and the crime and disorder bit. But the reason why we said children from harm, because that's what the Act actually says. So I think it would encompass that as part of those objectives, if that helps.
Licensing Act 2003 and approve it for consultation. All those again approving? That's unanimous. Thank you very much, committee. To note that the next meeting of the Committee of the Licensing Authority will be held on Wednesday, the 24th of September 2025, here at the Anglia Room at Elizabeth House. So with that, I'll thank you all and anybody watching on YouTube.